The Galactic Council's emergency session had been called for the third time in a century, and Admiral HFY, the Calridian Empire, knew something was terribly wrong. When the holographic displays showed nothing but empty space where HFY should have been, impossible, whispered Counselor Thranks, her crystalline form refracting the chamber's ambient light into nervous patterns. Planets don't simply vanish. Admiral HFY's eyes focused independently on the data streams cascading across his neural interface. 3 weeks ago, the human colony of New Anchorage on HFY had been home to 2.3 million settlers. The planet itself, a garden world rich in rare minerals, had been a jewel in humanity's expanding frontier. Now, according to every sensor, array within 50 light years, the planet no longer existed. Show me the hegemony's final transmission. HFY commanded. The chamber fell silent as Fleet Admiral HFY's image materialized. The insectoid leader of the hegemony's third battle fleet, his mandibles clicking with anticipation just 72 hours before the disappearance. The human vermin on HFY will serve as an example. HFY's translated voice buzzed through the speakers. Their resistance to our mining claims ends today. The hegemony's right to these worlds supersedes their pathetic colonial charter. We will strip mine their bones along with their precious metals. The transmission cut to static. Then nothing. Dr. Ellen Korath, the council's chief xenobiologist, stepped forward. Her pale blue skin seemed almost translucent under the harsh chamber lighting. Admirals, we've analyzed the quantum signatures from the system. Whatever happened there wasn't natural. The energy patterns suggest controlled dissolution. Explain, HFY demanded. The planet, its 3 moons. The entire hegemony invasion fleet, 127 ships carrying nearly 500,000 soldiers. They were all converted to pure energy simultaneously. The process was instantaneous and complete. No debris, no radiation, no trace particles, just gone. Counselor Thranks' form shifted colors rapidly, a sign of deep distress among her people. The humans couldn't possibly possess such technology. Their most advanced weapons are barely capable of cracking a moon, let alone, unless they don't, interrupted Commander Draytel, the Council's intelligence chief. His reptilian features remained impassive, but his inner eyelids flickered a tell that had served HFY well in past dealings. The colonists on New Anchorage weren't typical settlers. Our intelligence suggests they were refugees. Refugees from what? HFY's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to having his questions answered. Immediately, from Earth's Prometheus Project. The chamber erupted in overlapping translations as dozens of species voiced their alarm. Simultaneously, even HFY felt his stomach acids churn. The Prometheus Project was legend whispered about in the darkest corners of galactic intelligence networks. Supposedly, Earth's most dangerous scientists and engineers had been exiled to deep space after developing weapons too terrible for even humanity's bloody history. That's impossible. Thranks insisted. The Prometheus exiles were scattered across the galaxy over a century ago. They'd be dead by now. Humans live longer than most species, remember, Draytel replied grimly, and they've had over 100 years to develop their ideas. HFY accessed his personal files, pulling up classified reports from the Second Galactic War. The humans had fought with a ferocity that impressed even the most battle-hardened species. But their real talent lay in solving impossible problems with disturbingly creative solutions. They turned asteroid mining equipment into siege weapons, repurposed terraforming atmospheric processors into chemical weapon delivery systems, and somehow managed to jury-rig faster-than-light communication networks out of salvaged entertainment systems. Sir, his aide whispered, we're receiving a transmission from where? Everywhere. The chamber's main display flickered, then resolved into the image of an elderly human woman. Her hair was white as starlight, her face weathered by years and decisions no one should have to make. But her eyes burned with an intelligence that made HFY's skin crawl. Greetings, Galactic Council, she said in perfect universal standard. My name is Dr. Maxine Castellanos, and I speak for the lost colony of New Anchorage. You're probably wondering where we went. Her smile was grandmother sweet and absolutely terrifying. We took ourselves somewhere the hegemony couldn't follow, somewhere no one can follow. You see, we've been busy these past 100 years, and we've learned some interesting things about the nature of reality itself. She leaned forward, and her image seemed to pierce directly through the screen. Consider this a warning to any species that believes humanity makes for easy prey. We don't surrender. We don't negotiate with those who come to exterminate us. We simply solve the problem. The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber. In stunned silence, VexHFY realized he was holding his breath. 3 days after Dr. Castellano's transmission, the first ships began disappearing. Fleet Admiral Corveth of the Nexari Dominion was reviewing battle plans in his flagship's command center when his sensor officer's screech of terror cut through the bridge's routine murmur. The young Nexari's feathers were standing on end. Reflexive fear response his species couldn't control. Admiral, the patrol squadron at Rigel 7. They're gone. Define gone. Lieutenant, sir. They were conducting a standard sweep of the human trade routes as ordered. Then, nothing. No distress signals, no energy discharges, no debris. The quantum resonance signatures just stopped. Corveth's talons clicked against his command throne's armrests. The Nexari had joined the coalition hunting for new anchorages refugees. After the Galactic Council's emergency session, if these humans possessed technology capable of erasing entire worlds, they needed to be found and eliminated before they could use it again. Show me the last sensor readings. The holographic display materialized above the bridge, showing 12 Nexari cruisers in perfect formation. They were scanning the third planet of an uninhabited system when space itself seemed to fold. The ships didn't explode or disintegrate, they simply ceased to exist, as if reality had decided they were no longer necessary. Sir, his communications officer called out. We're receiving a narrow beam transmission. It's coming from inside the ship. Every warrior on the bridge reached for their weapons simultaneously. The Nexari were a proud species, descended from apex predators, and the idea that an enemy could infiltrate their flagship was almost incomprehensible. The voice that emerged from their speakers was calm, measured, and absolutely human. Admiral Corveth, this is Dr. Castellanos. I believe you lost some ships today. Impossible. Corveth snarled. Our communication systems are isolated from external networks. No signal could. Admiral, we've had over a century to study the fundamental forces of the universe. Your concepts of possible and impossible are charmingly limited. Her voice seemed to come from everywhere at once, the walls, the floor, even from inside his own skull. I'm speaking to you through quantum entanglement manipulation. Your patrol ships experience what we call dimensional displacement. They still exist. Technically, just not in this reality. Corveth's blood ran cold. What do you want, human? I want you to leave us alone. You and every other species that thinks humanity makes for easy conquest. But since you've chosen to hunt us, her voice took on a grandfather's patient tone that somehow made it infinitely more menacing. Let me show you what happens when you corner a human colony that has nothing left to lose. The bridge's main display activated, showing live feeds from across the Nexari fleet. In ship after ship, sections of hull were simply vanishing, not exploding, not cracking, just ceasing to exist. Atmosphere rushed out through holes that led to empty space, but the edges of these holes were perfectly smooth, as if reality had been cut with a surgical knife. Dimensional fractures. Dr. Castellanos explained conversationally as Nexari warriors scrambled for emergency suits. We learned to create microscopic rifts in space-time, very precise, very controlled. Watch what happens when we make them just a little bigger. One of Corveth's destroyers began folding in on itself, its hull bending through angles that shouldn't exist in normal space. The crew's screams cut off abruptly as the ship compressed into a point of light, then vanished. Stop this, Corveth roared. Admiral, you brought 47 ships to hunt us. You intended to glass our new home once you found it, correct? Turn our children into ash and claim their worlds for your dominion. The truth in her words made Corveth's throat constrict. The Nexari had indeed planned to make an example of any human refugees they found. A demonstration that would discourage other species from harboring Earth's exiles. So here's what's going to happen, Dr. Castellanos continued. You're going to return to your homeworld. You're going to tell your Dominion Council exactly what you witnessed here, and you're going to recommend that they never, ever hunt humans again. Another of his ships imploded, folding through dimensions that hurt to contemplate, because if you do, we'll show you what happens when we scale up these dimensional fractures. We can make rifts large enough to swallow star systems, Admiral, large enough to erase the Nexari homeworld and everyone on it. Corveth watched in horror as a third ship began to dissolve, its molecular bonds unraveling as space-time itself rejected its existence. You have 30 seconds to begin your retreat. Dr. Castellanos said, "Or I start targeting your flagship's reactor core. All ships, emergency jump to hyperspace." Corvus screamed as his fleet prepared to flee, reality twisted around one final destroyer. The ship stretched like taffy, its hull flowing through impossible geometries before snapping back into a single point and disappearing. 29 ships destroyed, his tactical officer reported, her voice shaking. No survivors detected. The hyperspace jump engaged, hurling them away from the nightmare they'd stumbled into. But even as the stars shifted around them, Dr. Castellanos' voice followed them through folded space itself. "Give our regards to the Dominion Council, Admiral, and remember we know where you live." The emergency gathering of the 7 hegemony fleets represented the largest military assembly in galactic history. Over 4,000 ships hung in formation around the gas giant Zerion Prime, their combined firepower capable of sterilizing entire sectors. War leader Vostok, supreme commander of the hegemony's military forces, surveyed the armada from his flagship's observation deck with grim satisfaction. "The human refugees will be found," he declared to his assembled fleet commanders, "and when they are, we will demonstrate why the hegemony has conquered 4 to 7 star systems." The holographic reports floating before them painted a picture of escalating terror. In the 3 weeks since Admiral Corvus' humiliating retreat, 11 different fleets had encountered the humans' dimensional weapons. The Zephyrian Collective had lost an entire squadron to what survivors described as space folding inside out. The Mercury Trade Federation's flagship had simply been erased from existence, while attempting to scan an empty system the humans might have passed through. Most disturbing of all were the refugees' messages. Each attack was followed by the same elderly human woman explaining, with grandmother-like patience, exactly how her people had killed their attackers and why they would continue doing so. "War leader," interrupted Intelligence Commander Drex High, his carapace clicking nervously. "Our deep space sensors have detected energy signatures consistent with the humans' dimensional manipulation technology. The readings are coming from the Kronos Nebula." Vostok's mandibles spread wide in what his species considered a smile. The nebula was a perfect hiding place. Its dense gas clouds would conceal any colony, and the gravitational anomalies within would mask most sensor readings. But the hegemony had spent decades mapping those anomalies. "How many ships does our intelligence suggest they possess?" "Unknown, war leader. But the energy signatures indicate a single, large installation, possibly built into an asteroid or small moon." "Excellent." Vostok turned to address his fleet commanders. "We will not repeat the mistakes of our predecessors. No patrols, no reconnaissance, no opportunities for the humans to eliminate our forces piecemeal. We jumped directly into the nebula with all 7 fleets simultaneously and reduced their hiding place to atomic dust." Sub-Commander Klexavar raised one cloud appendage. "War leader, what if this is a trap? The humans have demonstrated tactical sophistication, then we will spring their trap with overwhelming force." Vostok cut him off. "They may have exotic weapons, but they cannot simultaneously target 4,000 ships. Mathematics will defeat their sorcery. The jump coordinates were distributed across the fleet. Targeting solutions were calculated for every asteroid larger than a city block within the nebula. In 12 hours, the largest military operation in galactic history would commence." What none of them realized was that Dr. Maxine Castellanos was listening to every word. Deep within the nebula, the hidden colony of New Anchorage wasn't built into an asteroid. It existed within a carefully constructed pocket dimension, anchored to normal space by quantum tethers that the refugees had spent decades perfecting. The energy signatures the hegemony detected were deliberate false positives, designed to draw exactly this response. "They're taking the bait," reported Dr. Marcus Webb, his fingers dancing across holographic interfaces that manipulated the fundamental forces of reality. 7 fleets, just as we hoped." Dr. Castellanos nodded, her weathered face reflecting the blue glow of dimensional mathematics around them. The colony's 30,000 residents continued their daily lives in a space that existed between dimensions of refuge that had taken 100 years of theoretical physics and practical engineering to create. "Have our children been moved to the deep shelters?" "All non-essential personnel are secured in the lower dimensional layers," Webb confirmed. "If something goes wrong, it won't." Castellanos' voice carried absolute certainty. "We've run the calculations 1,000 times. The hegemony wants to make an example of us. Let's give them an example they'll never forget." She opened a communication channel that bypassed every known form of encryption, speaking directly to War Leader Vostok's flagship through quantum entanglement manipulation. War Leader, this is Dr. Castellanos. I know you can hear me. The bridge of Vostok's flagship erupted in chaos as his communications officers tried to trace the impossible signal. I'm aware of your fleet positions, she continued conversationally. 4,037 ships, arranged in a 7-pronged assault formation. Quite impressive. Your ancestors who designed those tactical doctrines would be proud. Impossible. Vostok snarled. Our fleet positions are classified beyond your ability to penetrate. War Leader, we exist in a pocket dimension that we created from scratch. Penetrating your communications network is a trivial exercise. Her voice carried the same patient tone she'd used with every other species that had threatened her people. I'm calling to give you one final opportunity to withdraw. We have 4,000 ships, human. Your dimensional tricks cannot save you from such overwhelming force. Actually, they can. You see, we've spent the last century learning to manipulate space-time itself, and we've discovered something interesting about hyperspace. The communication channel filled with complex mathematical equations that made Vostok's head hurt to contemplate. Hyperspace exists in 11 dimensions, War Leader. Your ships travel through it by creating a stable bubble of normal space-time around themselves. But what happens if we destabilize those bubbles while you're in transit? Vostok felt his stomach acids begin to churn. You'll find out in 11 hours and 32 minutes when your fleets jump into our nebula. Unless, of course, you choose to leave us alone and return to your conquered worlds. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in tense silence. War Leader, BlackHFY whispered, perhaps we should reconsider. No. Vostok's voice cut through the fear like a plasma cutter. The hegemony does not bow to threats from refugees. We proceed as planned. But even as he spoke, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were flying directly into the jaws of something far more dangerous than they understood. War Leader Vostok's confidence lasted exactly 7 minutes into the jump. The first sign of trouble came when Sub-Commander Klex entire battle group 230 ships simply stopped existing mid-translation through hyperspace. Their quantum signatures vanished so completely that it was as if they had never been built, never been crewed, never been launched. Impossible. BlackHFY breathed, his carapace rattling with involuntary fear responses. Ships don't just disappear. In hyperspace, the second wave of disappearances took another 300 vessels. This time, the fleet's sensors caught glimpses of what was happening. The ship's hyperspace bubbles were being inverted, turning their protective fields into dimensional shredders that tore the vessels apart from within. Crews had perhaps a second to scream before their atoms were scattered across 11 dimensions. All ships. Emergency drop to normal space. Vostok roared. Those vessels that managed to complete the emergency transition found themselves scattered across the Kronos Nebula in small, panicked groups. Nearly 800 ships had been lost in hyperspace, not destroyed, but simply edited out of existence by forces that treated the fundamental laws of physics as polite suggestions. War Leader, his sensor officer called out, I'm detecting massive gravitational anomalies throughout the nebula. The space-time fabric is being manipulated on a macro scale. Before Vostok could respond, reality twisted. The nebula's gas clouds began moving in patterns that hurt to observe, spiraling through dimensions that shouldn't exist, forming geometric shapes that made his crew's eyes bleed just from looking at them. Within those impossible formations, space itself was being rewritten. War Leader, the communications officer's voice cracked with terror. We're receiving a transmission from the humans. Dr. Castellanos' image appeared on every screen throughout the remaining fleet simultaneously. But something was wrong with the transmission. Her image flickered between multiple versions of herself, as if she existed in several dimensions at once. War Leader Vostok, she said, her voice echoing from directions that didn't exist. Welcome to our nebula. I hope you enjoyed your journey here, because very few of you will be making the return trip. The space around Vostok's flagship began to bend, and he realized with mounting horror that they weren't seeing multiple versions of Dr. Castellanos. They were seeing her as she actually existed now, spread across dimensional layers like a living equation. You see, she continued, when you've spent a century learning to manipulate reality itself, you eventually have to make a choice, remain human, or become something that can protect humanity. The nebulous gas clouds were forming into vast geometric patterns now, each one a component in some impossible machine built from space-time itself. Stars visible through the nebula began changing color as their light was filtered through manipulated dimensions. "We chose to become guardians," Dr. Castellanos said, "and guardians do whatever is necessary to protect their children." The first hegemony battle group to experience the true scope of the humans' transformation was Admiral Rex HFY's Second Fleet. His ships were maintaining formation near what appeared to be an empty patch of space when reality simply unfolded. The pocket dimension containing new anchorage revealed itself like a flower blooming in fast-forward. But this wasn't the colony the hegemony had expected to find. This was something else entirely, a city-sized construct that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, its architecture following rules that predated the universe itself. "By the void," Rex HFY whispered. "What are they?" The beings that emerged from the dimensional city barely resembled humans anymore. Dr. Castellanos and her fellow refugees had spent decades gradually translating themselves into higher dimensional forms, creatures of living mathematics that could exist in normal space-time or step sideways into dimensions where different physical laws applied. They moved through space without ships, their bodies trailing equations that rewrote reality. In their wake, when they reached the hegemony vessels, they didn't attack in any conventional sense. They simply corrected errors in the universe. Rex HFY watched in helpless fascination as one of his cruisers was slowly turned inside out, its crew experiencing the process in reverse temporal order, dying before they realized they were under attack, screaming before the first shot was fired. Another ship found its molecular structure rewritten at the quantum level, its hull transforming into a crystalline lattice that sang with harmonics no normal matter could produce. "All ships, open fire," Rex HFY commanded. The energy beams passed harmlessly through the transformed humans, who existed in dimensional layers where conventional weapons couldn't touch them. But their counterattack was devastating. Reality fractures opened throughout the fleet, each one a wound in the universe itself that consumed everything within light minutes. "War leader," Rex HFY's voice came through the communication system, distorted by dimensional static. "Our weapons are ineffective. These aren't humans anymore, they're something else entirely." Through the chaos of battle, Dr. Castellanos' voice reached every surviving ship simultaneously. "We gave you chances to leave us alone," she said, her tone carrying the sadness of someone who had been forced to become a monster to protect her children. "You chose to hunt us. You chose to try to exterminate our families, so we chose to become something that could hunt you back." Another battle group simply ceased to exist, their quantum signatures edited out of reality by beings who had learned to treat existence itself as code to be debugged. "We are no longer bound by human limitations," Dr. Castellanos continued. "We are no longer constrained by human morality. We have become the mathematics of extinction itself." Vostok realized, with growing horror, that the nebula wasn't just hiding the humans' colony, it was the colony. The entire space had been transformed into a living weapon, a multi-dimensional construct designed to protect 30,000 refugees by becoming something that could rewrite the laws of physics. "Retreat," he whispered. "War leader, all ships, full retreat, maximum hyperspace velocity." But as his remaining vessels prepared to jump, space-time itself began to close around them like a fist. The humans had learned to manipulate hyperspace transitions, trapping the hegemony fleets in normal space where they could be systematically eliminated. The real battle was about to begin. The slaughter began when reality learned to hunt. "War leader." Vostok's attempts to retreat were cut short when the nebula itself became a weapon. The transformed humans, no longer bound by the limitations of flesh, had spent decades turning the Kronos Nebula into a multi-dimensional maze where they controlled every fundamental force. Captain Rex HFY of the hegemony's third assault wing was the first to witness what humanity had become when cornered. Her battle group of 47 ships was maintaining defensive formation when space began to fold around them like origami made from the fabric of existence itself. Sensors are reading impossible geometries, her navigator screamed, his compound eyes bleeding from trying to process angles that existed in too many dimensions. "The space around us it's learning." The nebulous gas clouds had formed into vast neural networks spanning light years, each particle connected to every other through quantum entanglement. The entire stellar regions had become a single, vast intelligence capable of observing and manipulating matter at the subatomic level. Dr. Castellano's voice emerged from the cosmic neural network, no longer originating from a single point, but from everywhere at once. Captain HFY, your psychological profile indicates you joined the hegemony military to protect your homeworld from the next Sari expansion wars. You have 3 offspring and a bonded mate waiting for your return. HFY's blood turned to ice. The humans had somehow accessed classified hegemony personnel files stored in databases that should have been impossible to penetrate. I respect that motivation, Dr. Castellanos continued. But you came here to exterminate our children. That makes you a threat to be eliminated. The first ships began dying in ways that violated several fundamental laws of physics. The heavy cruiser talent of conquest found its hull spontaneously developing holes that existed in negative space wounds that removed matter from reality, rather than simply destroying it. The crew fell through the ship's deck into voids that led nowhere, their screams Doppler shifting into frequency ranges that shouldn't exist. Return fire, HFY commanded. Her fleet's plasma cannons discharged coordinated volleys, each beam carrying enough energy to crack a moon. The weapons found their targets beings of living mathematics that had once been human scientists and engineers. But instead of destroying them, the energy was absorbed and transformed. Dr. Marcus Webb, now existing as a distributed consciousness across 17 dimensions, caught a plasma beam in what had once been his hands. The energy swirled around his mathematical form like captured lightning, then was redirected back at the hegemony fleet as something far worse, plasma that burned in reverse temporal order. The destroyer claw of victory was struck by reverse time fire. Its crew experienced their deaths before the weapon hit, screaming in terror as they watched themselves burn from the inside out in a future that was rapidly becoming present. The ship's hull began decomposing into its component elements as time flowed backward around the impact point, showing the crew exactly how they would die while they were still alive to appreciate the horror. Dimensional displacement cannons online, reported Sub-Commander Erectal from BlackHFY's flagship, the hegemony's most advanced weapons devices that could punch holes through space-time itself locked onto the transformed humans. The first salvo tore multi-dimensional rifts in the fabric of reality, creating wounds in the universe that should have instantly destroyed anything caught within them. Instead, the humans stepped sideways through dimensions the weapons couldn't reach. Dr. Castellanos materialized directly on the bridge of BlackHFY's flagship, her form flickering between mathematical equations and something that might once have been an elderly woman. She moved through the ship's walls as if they were merely inconvenient suggestions, her presence causing the bridge's instruments to display readings that violated causality. War leader, she said, her voice emerging from every speaker simultaneously. You're using dimensional weapons. How wonderfully ironic. She gestured, and space-time twisted around the flagship's weapon systems. The dimensional displacement cannons turned inside out, their targeting systems locking onto the hegemony fleet itself. We've spent a century learning to swim in the spaces between dimensions, she explained as BlackHFY's own weapons began firing on his ships. Your dimensional cannons are like trying to drown fish by throwing water at them. The massacre escalated beyond anything in recorded galactic history, the transformed humans now numbering in the tens of thousands as New Anchorage's entire population had undergone the dimensional transition, moved through the hegemony fleet like antibodies through an infected organism. Commander Vexmer's entire battle squadron was consumed by an entity that had once been a human child, 8-year-old Jenny Okafor, who had learned to exist as pure mathematics and now expressed her fear and anger as equations that deleted matter from reality. Her transformed consciousness reached out with the innocent cruelty of childhood and simply subtracted enemy ships from existence, erasing them as thoroughly as chalk marks from a blackboard. Please, Vexmer transmitted as his ship began to dissolve around him. We have families, so did we, Jenny's voice replied, carrying the terrible wisdom of a child who had learned that sometimes violence was the only mathematics that mattered. You came to kill our families, now we're solving the problem. The hegemony's casualty reports became meaningless as ships were destroyed, faster than tactical computers could process. 700 vessels eliminated in the first hour, another 1,000 gone in the second. The transformed humans weren't just killing the invaders, they were demonstrating that humanity, when pushed beyond all reasonable limits, could become something that made the universe itself recoil in horror. Admiral Korvash's Pride Squadron, the elite of the hegemony's Fourth Fleet, found themselves trapped in a pocket of space where time moved in circles. They experienced their destruction over and over again, dying and being reborn and dying again as the humans demonstrated their mastery over temporal mechanics. "This is impossible," Corvus screamed as he watched his flagship explode for the 17th time. "No species could possess such power. No species should need such power." Dr. Castellanos replied, her voice echoing across the loop of repeating time. "But you forced us to become monsters to protect our children, live with the consequences, forever." By the end of the third hour, barely 800 ships remained of the hegemony's 4,000-vessel armada. Those that survived did so only because the humans allowed it kept alive to witness the full scope of what they had unleashed. War leader Vashtok, his command structure in ruins and his fleet scattered across multiple dimensions, realized with crystalline clarity that the hegemony had not encountered an enemy they could defeat. They had encountered a force of nature that wore the face of evolution itself. War leader Vashtok's final gambit began with an act of desperation that would echo through galactic history for millennia. With barely 800 ships remaining from his 4,000-vessel armada, surrounded by beings who had transcended the normal limitations of matter and energy, Vashtok made the decision that would transform him from conqueror to legend. All remaining ships he transmitted on emergency frequencies that bypassed dimensional interference. "Initiate Protocol Omega." His surviving commanders understood immediately. Protocol Omega was the hegemony's ultimate weapon of coordinated hyperspace collision that would create a cascading dimensional collapse, destroying everything within several light years. It was a weapon of mutual annihilation, designed to be used only when defeat was certain and revenge was the only victory left. War leader Sub-Commander Drex High protested, his carapace clicking with nervous energy. "Protocol Omega will destroy us as well. Our families, our homeworlds, they'll never know they'll know we died fighting." Vashtok cut him off, and they'll know that humanity paid the price for their unnatural evolution. But Dr. Castellanos was listening. She had been listening to everything since the battle began. Her consciousness distributed across the quantum foam that underlied reality itself. "War leader," her voice emerged from the bridge's own structural metal, the ship's hull vibrating to form words. "You're planning to create a dimensional cascade. Clever. In normal space-time, such a weapon would indeed destroy everything within its radius." Vashtok's mandibles spread in a final gesture of defiance. "Then you understand that your victory ends here. Human, we died together." "Actually, no." Dr. Castellanos materialized on his bridge again, but this time her form was more stable, more focused. "You see, we've learned something about dimensional cascades. They only work if space-time follows the rules you expect it to follow." She gestured, and reality began to shift around the hegemony's remaining ships. But instead of the crushing, destructive transformation they had witnessed before, space seemed to be insulating itself. "We're placing your ships in a dimensional buffer," she explained. "A space where your cascade weapon will have no effect on normal reality. You can destroy yourselves to your heart's content. It won't touch us or anyone else." The horror of complete futility settled over Vashtok like a burial shroud. Even their final weapon, their ultimate act of defiance, had been rendered meaningless by beings who could rewrite the fundamental laws of physics on demand. "But here's what's going to happen instead," Dr. Castellanos continued, her voice taking on the same patient, instructive tone she might have used in a university lecture hall a century ago. "You're going to return to your homeworld. You're going to tell your hegemony council exactly what happened here, and you're going to recommend that they update their military doctrines to include a very important new rule." The dimensional buffer around the hegemony's ships began to shift, forming corridors that led back to normal space-time. But these weren't random passages, they were carefully constructed pathways that would carry the survivors directly back to their homeworld, whether they wanted to go or not. "Never hunt humans." The words weren't just spoken, they were written into the quantum structure of space-time itself, around the fleeing ships, becoming a fundamental law of physics that would follow them back to hegemony space. "You see, war leader, we could simply erase your entire species from existence. It would be trivial at this point, but that would teach the galaxy nothing except that we're willing to commit genocide. And despite what we've become, we're still human enough to prefer a different lesson." The transformation was visible. Now the entire nebula was reshaping itself, gas clouds forming into vast symbols that could be seen from other star systems. Message glyphs in dozens of galactic languages, all saying the same thing. Here lie the remnants of those who threaten human children, the lesson we want to teach. Dr. Castellanos said as Vostok's ships were gently, but inexorably pushed toward the dimensional corridors. Leading home is that humanity, when pushed to the absolute limit, doesn't just fight back. We evolve. We become something new, something adapted specifically to defend against whatever threatened us. One of the transformed humans, Dr. Webb, though his consciousness now existed as a living equation spanning several dimensions, appeared. Alongside Dr. Castellanos, your species made the mistake of believing that advanced technology meant you were superior to beings who could adapt. Dr. Webb's voice resonated through dimensions that had no names. You forgot that humans are the species that looked at fire and said, I can make this better. We looked at metal and made tools. We looked at the atom and made weapons. We looked at space and made it our home. His mathematical form pulsed with energies that had once powered stars. And when you threatened our children, we looked at reality itself and decided it needed improvement. The dimensional corridors were almost complete now. Pathways of folded space-time that would carry the survivors back to their homeworld in minutes rather than months. But before they departed, Dr. Castellanos had one final demonstration. War leader, observe. She gestured toward empty space, and suddenly there was a planet where none had existed before, not created from matter, but woven from the quantum foam that existed between dimensions. It was perfect in every detail: continents, oceans, weather, systems, even the small moon in stable orbit. We could populate the galaxy with worlds like this. She said quietly, we could solve the resource conflicts that drive species to war. We could make the universe abundant enough that no one would ever need to fight for survival again. The planet began to rotate, and Vostok could see cities on its surface, human cities, but also structures that could house dozens of different alien species in comfort and safety. But first, the galaxy has to learn that humanity is not prey. Dr. Castellanos continued, we are not a species to be conquered, enslaved, or exterminated. We are the species that, when pushed beyond endurance, becomes the thing that other species have nightmares about. The demonstration planet dissolved back into quantum foam, its lesson delivered. Return to your homeworld, war leader. Tell them what you've seen. Tell them that the refugees of New Anchorage are no longer hiding. We're watching. We're listening. And if any species decides that humans make easy targets, her form began to fade, dispersing back into the multi-dimensional matrix that now comprised the transformed colony. Well, they'll discover that we've had over a century to prepare for the next time someone threatens our children. The dimensional corridors activated, and Vostok's surviving ships were swept away through folded space-time, carried back to hegemony territory, whether they wanted to go or not. As they traveled through the impossible geometries of hyperspace, each crew member found themselves experiencing visions, glimpses of what humanity could become. If pushed further, images of transformed humans spreading across the galaxy like antibodies, adapting to counter every possible threat. Behind them, the Kronos Nebula settled into its new configuration. What had once been a hiding place for refugees was now something else entirely. A fortress built from the fundamental forces of the universe, staffed by beings who had chosen to become living weapons to protect their children. The transformation was complete. The hunted had become the hunters, and the galaxy would never be the same. 6 months after the Battle of Kronos Nebula, the Galactic Council convened its most important session in over 1,000 years. Representatives from every major species sat in stunned silence as war leader Vostok delivered his report, the survivors' account of how 4,700 ships and nearly 2 million soldiers had been systematically dismantled by beings that barely resembled the humans they had once been. They offered us mercy, Vostok concluded, his voice hollow with the weight of absolute defeat. Creatures capable of rewriting reality itself offered us mercy. We should have accepted it when they first asked us to leave them alone. Admiral BlackHFY of the Calridian Empire studied the holographic recordings. Vostok had brought back impossible images of ships being edited out of existence, space-time folding like paper, and beings of living mathematics moving through dimensions that shouldn't exist. The implications are clear, BlackHFY said finally. Humanity has transcended the normal limitations of biological evolution. They have become something unprecedented in galactic history. Counselor Thrinks, her crystalline form refracting nervous patterns of light, raised the question everyone was thinking. What happens now? Do we attempt to contain them? Do we negotiate? Do we prepare for war with beings who exist outside normal physics? The answer came from an unexpected source. You do nothing, Dr. Castellanos said, her image materializing in the center of the council chamber without any technological assistance. But her appearance had changed. She flickered between her original human form and something else, a pattern of living equations that hurt to look at directly. Dr. Castellanos, HFY said carefully, the council appreciates your attendance. But surely you understand our concerns. Your people have demonstrated capabilities that could threaten every species in the galaxy. Admiral, let me address those concerns directly. Her voice carried harmonics that seemed to emerge from the quantum structure of space itself. The transformed humans of New Anchorage have no interest in conquest, expansion, or dominion over other species. We became what we are for one reason only: to protect our children and grandchildren from extinction. She gestured, and the air above the council chamber displayed images of the colony as it existed now, not the multi-dimensional fortress the hegemony had encountered, but something far more remarkable. Children played in parks that existed in pocket dimensions, their laughter echoing across impossible geometries. Schools where human and alien refugee children learned together, taught by beings who could manipulate the fundamental forces of reality but chose to use that power for education and wonder. We harbor refugees from 17 different species, Dr. Castellanos continued, all of them fleeing persecution, war, or genocide. We've created a space where they can live safely, regardless of what threatens them in normal reality. And what about the rest of the galaxy? Councillor Franks asked. What about species who might see your power as a threat to be eliminated? Dr. Castellanos' form solidified slightly, taking on more of her original human appearance. Counselor, we spent over a century being hunted by species who saw us as threats to be eliminated. We know how that story ends. The chamber fell silent as the implication sank in. But here's what we learned. She continued, the universe is vast enough for everyone. Scarcity, the resource conflicts that drive species to war, is an artificial limitation. We've demonstrated that matter and energy can be manipulated at the quantum level. We can create worlds, terraform dead systems, even generate resources from the quantum foam itself. She paused, letting that information settle. We're prepared to share this knowledge, freely and without conditions, with any species that agrees to one simple principle: the absolute prohibition of genocide, extermination campaigns, or species-level warfare. The offer hung in the air like a transformation waiting to happen. Think about what we're proposing, Dr. Castellanos said. An end to resource wars, an end to territorial expansion through conquest, an end to the fear that drives species to view each other as existential threats. Admiral HFY leaned forward. And if species refuse this offer, if they continue to wage extermination campaigns, then they'll discover what happens when humanity's children are threatened. Dr. Castellanos replied, her voice carrying the same patient, instructive tone that had terrified war leader Vashtok. We've demonstrated that we can transcend normal physical limitations when necessary. Other species might want to consider whether they're prepared to face beings who can rewrite the laws of physics. The transformation had already begun. In the weeks following the council session, species after species approached the transformed humans of New Anchorage, seeking the technology to create abundant resources without conquest. The Zephyrian collective abandoned their expansion wars when they learned they could simply create new worlds for their growing population. The Mercury Trade Federation discovered that scarcity-based economics became irrelevant when matter itself could be generated from quantum foam. But it was the children who truly demonstrated what humanity had become. 10-year-old Sarah Chen, no longer bound by normal dimensional limitations, but still possessing the curiosity and wonder of childhood, became the galaxy's first multi-dimensional artist, creating sculptures that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously and could be appreciated by beings with radically different sensory apparatus. 12-year-old Marcus Okafor learned to communicate with species whose consciousness existed as distributed quantum patterns, becoming the first translator capable of bridging the gap between matter-based and energy-based intelligence. The transformed adults have become guardians and protectors, beings of immense power dedicated to ensuring that no child, human or alien, would ever again face the threat of species-level extinction. And in the deepest layers of the pocket dimension that housed New Anchorage, Dr. Maxine Castellanos kept a simple garden where earth flowers grew in alien soil. tended by hands that could reshape reality, but chose instead to nurture life. The refugees had become something unprecedented in galactic history, a species that had transcended the normal limitations of biological evolution, not through conquest or dominion, but through an absolute commitment to protecting the vulnerable and innocent. The universe had learned a new rule. Humanity, when cornered and threatened with extinction, didn't just fight back. They evolved into something that could make extinction obsolete. And in the end, perhaps that was the most human response of all faced with a problem that seemed impossible to solve. They had simply refused to accept the limitations everyone else took for granted. The galaxy would never be the same, and that, as Dr. Castellanos often told her transformed colleagues, was exactly the point. We didn't just survive, she would say, watching children play in dimensions that shouldn't exist, their laughter echoing across folded space-time. We became something that could make sure survival itself was never again in question. The disappeared colony had returned, bringing with them something unprecedented in galactic history, hope that transcended the normal limitations of physics, mortality, and the endless cycle of fear that had driven species to war since the beginning of recorded time. Humanity had taught the universe a new lesson. Sometimes, the only way to protect innocence is to become something that innocence never needs to fear. And in that transformation, they had found not just survival, but a purpose worthy of beings who could rewrite reality itself, the eternal guardianship of all those too small, too young, or too vulnerable to protect themselves. The colony hadn't just disappeared and taken their invaders with them. They had taken the very concept of inevitable extinction and edited it out of the universe itself.